An independent editorial defense analysis focused on Australia's strategic environment.
The Osborne Naval Shipyard currently stands as a physical testament to a high-stakes strategic wager. It represents a tangible intersection where political ambition meets the unyielding friction of industrial reality. While the geopolitical logic behind the AUKUS agreement was built upon binding the industrial bases of the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia into a seamless trilateral entity, the mechanical execution of this strategy has encountered a critical variable, a variable that was previously treated as a constant. The assumption that American shipyards could surge production to meet both domestic requirements and foreign military sales is now facing a stress test. This test suggests the timeline for Australia acquiring a sovereign nuclear-powered attack submarine capability may drift significantly from the initial optimistic projections. This divergence between diplomatic intent and industrial capacity forces a re-evaluation of what constitutes sovereign capability in the mid-21st century Australian context. Recent assessments from within the United States legislative framework have illuminated a structural vulnerability in the transfer mechanism of the Virginia-class submarines. The provision that allows a United States president to withhold transfer if it degrades their own national security creates a conditional loop that Australia cannot control. This is not merely a legal technicality, it is a reflection of a severe deficit in the American submarine industrial base. The current production rate of approximately 1.2 to 1.3 hulls annually sits well below the threshold of 2.33 hulls required to recapitalize the United States Navy while simultaneously sparing 3 to 5 vessels for the Royal Australian Navy. Consequently, the Australian government faces a scenario where significant capital expenditure serves as an insurance policy with no guaranteed payout. This is recently evidenced by the transfer of $3.9 billion Australian dollars to support the industrial base of a foreign power. From a systems perspective, this financial injection into the United States supply chain represents a reversal of traditional procurement dynamics. Typically, a nation purchases a finished asset. In this instance, Australia is purchasing the potential for future production capacity in an allied state. This dynamic introduces a profound risk regarding the definition of sovereignty. If the transfer of flagged vessels becomes unviable due to the operational requirements of the United States Navy in theaters such as the Taiwan Strait, the fallback mechanism of Submarine Rotational Force West transforms. It shifts from a transitional training arrangement into a permanent strategic end state. In such a configuration, the physical presence of nuclear-powered submarines in Western Australia would be maintained. However, the operational command chain would likely remain tethered to Pearl Harbor rather than Canberra. This distinction is critical for Australian defense planning. It implies a shift from possessing an independent strategic deterrent to hosting an allied forward-deployed force. The response to this volatility is visible in the acceleration of asymmetric programs that offer a hedge against the delays of the primary capital ship program. The rapid acquisition and development of the Ghost Shark extra-large autonomous underwater vehicle indicates a parallel track in Australian maritime strategy. While a nuclear-powered attack submarine offers high-end kinetic lethality and special forces insertion capabilities, the Ghost Shark represents a volume-based approach to sea denial. The disparity in unit cost and personnel requirements suggests that the Royal Australian Navy is preparing for a future force structure that must operate effectively, even if the crewed nuclear fleet is delayed or reduced in number. This shift toward autonomy is not merely a technological upgrade. It is a structural necessity given the chronic recruitment shortfalls facing the Australian Defence Force. A system that requires 0 personnel on board bypasses the human resource bottleneck that currently constrains the expansion of the submarine service. Furthermore, the integration of long-range strike capabilities signals a move toward an impactful deterrence doctrine that is less platform-centric. Systems such as the high-mobility artillery rocket system and the naval strike missile impose cost on an adversary from the littoral edge. They offer a defensive layer that does not rely on the complex sustainment cycle of nuclear propulsion. However, this introduces a trade-off in reach and persistence. A diesel-electric fleet augmented by autonomous systems and land-based missiles can deny access to the immediate approaches of the continent. But it lacks the strategic projection capability to influence the security architecture in the wider Indo-Pacific region in the same manner as a nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarine. Beyond the underwater domain, the restructuring of the surface combatant fleet provides a parallel narrative of compromised ambition and pragmatic adjustment. The decision to truncate the acquisition of the Hunter-class frigates from 9 to 6 vessels acknowledges that the pursuit of the ultimate anti-submarine warfare platform had become detached from the strategic necessity of hull availability. This high-end capability is now being supplemented by the introduction of general-purpose frigates, specifically the Japanese Mogami-class design. This represents a significant pivot in Australian procurement philosophy. By integrating a Japanese platform into a naval order of battle traditionally dominated by British and American designs, Australia is signaling a diversification of its strategic partnerships. However, this creates a complex logistical tale. It requires the sustainment of multiple distinct combat systems and supply chains. The operational logic suggests a move towards a tiered Navy. Here, the Hunter class provides a specialized, high-intensity screen for high-value assets. Meanwhile, the more numerous general-purpose frigates undertake the constabulary and presence missions that currently overstretch the aging Anzac-class fleet. As the friction between the high-end ambition of Pillar 1 and the pragmatic necessity of Pillar 2 creates a complex procurement environment. This is further complicated by the demographic reality of the Australian workforce. The intention to operate nuclear-powered vessels requires a stewardship culture and a technical workforce that currently does not exist at scale within the Australian borders. The challenge is not merely training sailors to operate the reactors. It is generating a sustainable pipeline of nuclear physicists, safety regulators, and specialized maintenance technicians. The reliance on the United States and the United Kingdom for this human capital transfer integrates the Royal Australian Navy deeply into the Anglo-American military ecosystem. So deeply, in fact, that the concept of independent operation becomes theoretical rather than practical. If the maintenance and certification of the nuclear propulsion plant require the constant presence of Allied technical personnel, the sovereign ability to deploy the asset unilaterally becomes severely constrained, especially during a crisis where Allied interests do not align with Australian interests. This trajectory suggests that the concept of national defense is evolving from a model of expeditionary independence to one of integrated deterrence. The force structure emerging from these decisions is designed to plug directly into a larger coalition framework rather than to operate as a standalone regional hegemon. While this integration maximizes the technological lethality available to the Australian Defence Force, it implicitly accepts a reduction in strategic autonomy. The hardware choices dictate the strategy. By committing to systems that require the supply chains and intelligence architecture of the United States to function effectively, Australia is locking its defense policy into a path dependent on the continued stability and engagement of its primary ally. Ultimately, the evolving landscape of Australian naval acquisition reveals a tension between the desire for a premium Tier 1 capability and the constraints of a global industrial base that is operating at maximum capacity. The path forward appears to rely less on the linear replacement of one submarine class with another. Instead, it leans more on a hybrid ecosystem, where sovereign autonomy is maintained through smaller, cheaper, and more numerous uncrewed systems, while the high-end nuclear capability serves as a shared allied resource rather than a purely national asset. This strategic duality requires a sophisticated balancing act, ensuring that the pursuit of the ultimate deterrent does not hollow out the conventional forces required for the immediate and medium-term security of the maritime approaches.